what went well or not well, and what you expect from us so that we can make it more interactive. Organizers. So we have Rajesh, Prithvi, Gaurav, myself, Bharat, and Piyush. So not taking much time, I'll hand over the session to Ashish, who will be the speaker for today. Yeah, please, Ashish, you can take it from now. Ashish, are you there? You're on mute. Yeah,
Yeah, you can hear me now, right?
yes, yes. Yeah, you
Okay,
can take from
let
now.
me share my screen.
Sure,
Let me know once my screen is visible.
sure, we can see your screen.
Okay, okay. Hi, everyone. First of all, a warm welcome to this session for CloudHub 2.0 deployment using Bitbucket CI/CD pipelines. And I am your speaker today. Let's have a brief introduction about myself. So, I am Ashish Chen. I have around 12 plus years of experience. All my experience is in integration technologies, middleware, which spans various middleware tools like TIBCO, Spring Boot, MuleSoft. Talking specifically about MuleSoft, I have around 4 plus years of experience in MuleSoft, which is close to 5 years. And I am a certified MuleSoft developer, certified MuleSoft architect for platform architecture and integration architecture, and I am a go-to-market champion. I'm currently working with Accenture, and I am associate manager there, working as a solution architect. Okay, let's start with the session. So let's take a look on the agenda first. So we'll be going through introduction to the CI/CD. We'll also take a look what is Bitbucket Cloud and how the CI/CD workflow is realized using Bitbucket Cloud. We'll take a look on how do we set up CI/CD pipelines using Bitbucket. Uh, there'll be an introduction that how Bitbucket Slack integration will be done to get the notifications on Slack, and we'll look one of the example on branching strategy and one of the example on development lifecycle. So this is the agenda for today. So let's begin, guys. So we'll first go with the introduction to CI/CD. So most of us already know what CI/CD is, but let's have a refresher on CI/CD. So CI/CD basically stands for the combined practices of continuous integration and continuous delivery, or you can say continuous deployment. Uh, where CI is developers practicing continuous integration, merge their changes back to the main branch as soon as possible. So when developers they when more than one developer working on a same piece of code, and there is a requirement to merge the code in order to run as a whole, right? So that merging and integration is being taken care by the CI part, which is continuous integration. And the rest of the part, like deploying to higher environments and all those stuff, releasing the code and deploying it to higher environments, that is being taken by continuous delivery or continuous deployment. So basically, if you want to automate your software deployment workflows to get the better code quality, right? So we make use of continuous integration and continuous delivery, that is CI/CD. This process includes building, testing, merging the code, and deploying to various environments. So there'll be a question like, what is the difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment? Because we have like seen these terms here and there and interchangeably, but yeah, continuous delivery and continuous deployment a little bit different from each other. So how they are different? So in the continuous delivery and continuous deployment, the only difference is the manual intervention. So if you look at the screen, this diagram, we have a continuous integration which includes the build and test, and there is a continuous delivery and continuous deployment. So when we talk about continuous delivery, uh, we do the acceptance test, we do the deployment to staging, but deployment to production is requiring a manual intervention. We are not automatically deploying to the production environment. Instead, we are waiting for a manual intervention to deploy it to production environment. If this is the case, then we call it continuous delivery. However, continuous deployment is one step further to it. That doesn't require any human intervention, manual intervention. We go till production in an automated manner. If that is the case, then we call it continuous deployment. Let's move further. So there are some benefits of continuous delivery and continuous deployment, that is CI/CD, that is faster time to market. So since everything, most of the steps are already automated, and developers are not taking that pain of integrating the code and building the code and deploying the code, because everything is taken care of by the pipelines, the time to market is faster. You can move your code quickly to production so that the end user or end customer can utilize those APIs or those code in a faster manner. So we have a faster time to market when we use CI/CD. There is an improved mean time to resolution. Mean time to resolution, or MTTR, is basically the mean time which is taken to repair a broken feature in a code. So it measures the maintainability of repairable features and sets an average time to repair a broken feature. So basically, it helps you to track the amount of time spent to recover from a failure. So your mean time to resolution is improved since you are working on smaller code parts. You are integrating them, and everything is automated. You are moving from the manual tasks to the automated tasks. So your MTTR is improved. Smaller code changes, it allows you to integrate small pieces of code. You do not need to create the entire code at once and then build and then move it. You can integrate small pieces of changes which you are doing, and you can test them. If you're working on small features, it is simpler and easier to handle, and you will have fewer issues. You can test those features in a faster manner, and it allows developers to recognize the issues uh, before too much work is done on the code. So smaller code changes helps a lot when you're doing a CI/CD pipeline. You can integrate and deploy your small piece of code changes as well. More test reliability. Yes, using CI/CD pipeline, test reliability is improved because the bit size and specific changes introduced to the system. So you are doing your accurate testing on the specific piece of changes. So test reliability is improved. Since you have done lot of automation here, and you have already done your smaller code changes are moved to production, and you have a faster time to market, your costs are reduced, uh, and hence you have a customer satisfaction as well, because the features are readily available to use by the customer. And Hence, it saves the developer times and also includes the return of investment because your code quality is also improved. Developers do not have to look into all these things, which is being taken care by the CI/CD pipelines. So these are some of the features, some of the benefits of the CI/CD pipelines. We do have a lot of other benefits. I have covered majorly these major benefits. Okay, let's move to the next. So since we have understood what is a CI/CD and what are the benefits of CI/CD, let's take a look on Bitbucket Cloud and how Bitbucket is used to realize a CI/CD workflow. Okay, so Bitbucket Cloud is a Git-based code hosting and collaboration tool. So you must have worked on repository tools like Git. Uh, Most of us have also worked on Bitbucket. So it's basically a code repository where you keep your code, right? It's a code hosting tool and it is Git-based, but it too introduces the pipeline feature as well. So it introduces a Bitbucket pipelines, which is an integrated CI/CD service built into Bitbucket Cloud. So, with the help of a single configuration file, you can also create your Bitbucket pipelines. Now, why do we use Bitbucket for the pipelines? Uh, in the scenarios where you are already working with Bitbucket code repository, in the scenarios where you're already working with the Atlassian products, right? So why to use any other product for this, for realizing the CI/CD pipelines when you're already using a repository tool which is Bitbucket? You can utilize the Bitbucket pipelines itself to realize your CI/CD workflow inside the Bitbucket, and it's just done with a single configuration file. You do not need to do much setup to do that. And since you are if you're using Atlassian products, the all the Atlassian products gel together. You can integrate your Bitbucket cloud with your Jira, Confluence. You can create your pipelines in Bitbucket, and you can also have a code repository in Atlassian. So everything can be done with a single product. Now Bitbucket pipelines allows you to do the automation around build, test, and deploy your code on various environments just with a single repository file. Okay, let's take a look on some of the Bitbucket pipeline components. Bitbucket offers a lot of components, but I have majorly covered these components which are generally used to create Bitbucket pipelines for MuleSoft deployments. So, if you want to deep dive, you can go ahead and look at the Bitbucket pipeline configuration on the web. It's readily available, but I'm covering major components which are being used in creating Bitbucket pipelines for MuleSoft. If you want to deep dive, you can go ahead and check those websites. Okay, let us look at these options. So one is the global options. So first of all, there'll be a single configuration file. The name will be specific, which is Bitbucket dash pipelines dot yml file. That will be a configuration file which will reside in your root directory of your code, and all these components will be written in that configuration file itself. So it has a lot of properties, and these are those properties or components of the Bitbucket pipelines.yaml file. So first of all, the global options. So there are few options which you can define globally, which will be available to each and every step you will be creating in your pipeline. What are these options? That is max time, Docker, and size. Max time is basically is to define that how much time your step, how much time your step will run. So it is decided in minutes. So if you see the value 30 here, 30, that is 30 minutes. So every step will run for 30 minutes. If it is able to complete before 30 minutes, well and good. But if the step is taking more time than 30 minutes, then the step will automatically gets timed out. So this max time you can define here. So sometimes your system hangs, or any step which you have written which is hanging and waiting for a continuous longer time, then there is no point of waiting for long, right? You can time out that step using your max time property. The minimum value is 1 and the maximum value is 120. By default, the value is 120 minutes, but you can change that value using this max time option. Docker. Docker is basically, it provides a Docker service in every step. So if you want to use any Docker property or something, you can use that Docker property here and mark it true to have the Docker service available. But generally, we do not use that. So that is more or less not required when we are creating MuleSoft pipelines. Uh, then we have a size. So every step which is running in your pipeline uh, will consume some amount of memory. So by default, it has a 4 GB of memory provided to every step, but you can increase that memory using the size option. If you do 2x, then the memory will be double, that is 8 GB of memory will be available. By default, it will be a 4 GB of memory. So basically, you write certain steps in your Bitbucket pipelines. Those steps execute as a script, right? And every step, what every step will do, whenever you will create, you will be creating a Bitbucket pipeline, you will be defining some steps like, first of all, create those artifacts, then do the testing of the code, do the building of the code, then do the deployment to dev environment, do the deployment on test environment. So these are all the steps which you will be writing in your pipeline.xml. In Bitbucket, each and every step is run in a separate container. So the steps are not, uh, they will not be linked to each other. They will be running in a separate container with a certain amount of memory. And if not specified, these steps will be sequential. You can also create parallel steps with the property parallel, but if you're not specifying that parallel, though, so all the steps will be executed in a sequential manner. Okay. The next option is git clone behavior. So what happens when you write a step, your Bitbucket repositories gets cloned automatically into a container, and then that particular step will run on that cloned repository or cloned files, not the actual repository which is residing in your Bitbucket. Instead, it will run in the cloned repository. So every time a step is written, it will clone your repository and run that particular step. Okay. So this clone is for that. So if we say enabled false, then it will not clone the repository. It will just simply run the step, but it will not clone your repository. But by default, it will always clone the repository. And if you want to run certain steps which requires your codes or something, right, then you have to clone it. Otherwise, if you're simply writing like printing something, then you can make it clone enabled false, so that it shouldn't clone your repository unnecessarily. When we say depth, depth is generally how much depth you want to clone, how many commits you want to take into one. When Bitbucket is cloning, so it will clone the first or the top 50 commits automatically. So depth is defining that. And LFS is basically large file system. So if you have like Bitbucket provides a large file system as well, where you keep your large files, and if you want to download those large files, then you can use this LFS. It's a separate topic, and it's a huge topic, LFS. Majorly, what when you are dealing with large amount of files, you keep it in your Bitbucket LFS, and if you want to download those files in your step, then you use this LFS property and mark it true. You can also have this property inside the step. if not all the steps, and it is recommended to have this property inside the step, not globally. So if you define before your pipelines itself, then it will be applied globally to all the steps which you're defining. The third is definitions. Definitions is basically, I'll give an example of a RAML. So you define your traits, you define your data types separately, and then you make use or reference those traits and data types inside your main RAML file, right? In each and every URI you are writing. Similarly, you can define your steps under definitions, and whatever steps you want to have in your pipeline, you can use those steps which are defined earlier. So if you see at the right hand side at this point, definition, steps, right? And then you have pipeline. So this pipelines is basically is your acting steps which you have written, and the definitions is you have defined those steps. Once the step is defined, you can use the same step in your pipeline. So if you want to use in different branches, you can use the same step in different branches. So that is why we use definitions to define the steps, so that those steps can be utilized when we are writing the actual pipeline code. Okay, so this is how you write your definitions. In your definitions, you will have steps. So steps is the next. So each and every step will be running it in its own container, and it will be doing a certain task. So suppose this is your first step. This first step is just printing the message that the pipeline step starts. The second step is basically creating an artifacts or downloading an artifact, and putting those artifacts under this artifacts property. And the third step is deploying your uh, code to sandbox environment, right? So these are three different steps which we have written. So uh, major configuration, the step is the step name, whatever you are writing, the step placeholder, the step name. Then if you want to have any property, like you want to have a clone, or if you want to have max time also inside, you can write that. And then the script, so whatever script you will be writing here, that will be running in a separate container. Okay, artifacts is used when you have certain since we have already learned that our steps will be running in separate containers. But what if I want to have an artifact which is generated in one step and will be used in other steps? So you can make use of this artifact property. So if you see this pipeline, right, this step, artifact step, what we are doing here is we are simply cloning a Bitbucket uh, common URL. So there is a common repository which we are cloning here, and from that clone we are keeping settings.xml and .sh files as artifacts. So when we say a property artifacts, and when we provide the path of those files, now these files will be stored in your Bitbucket memory, and will be available to the next steps. These files will be stored in your Bitbucket memory and will be available to the next steps. The amount of time it hold these files is 14 days. After 14 days, these files will be vanished, and you can also download these files. I'll show you once I'll be giving the demo that how these files can be seen. But if you want to use some files created in one step, you create those files, put it under artifacts, and then those files can be used in the next steps. Only the files which are put under artifacts will be available to your next steps. So that is why we use artifacts. Then we have triggers. Triggers is basically how do you want to trigger your pipeline. So you are merging your code, but at what point of time you want that your pipeline runs. So there are certain triggers which Bitbucket provides you. That is a default pipeline. So if you want every time a default pipeline runs, you can write a default pipeline. If you want to run your pipeline on any changes on a specific branches, then you use branches trigger. So if you see here, we have already used branches trigger, and we have mentioned two branches, develop and main. So any activity which is happening in develop branch, it will automatically trigger the pipeline and will run all the steps related to develop branch. Similarly, we have pull request. So if you want to run your pipeline on pull request, you can mention that instead of branches, you can mention pull request here, and then you can provide a certain pull request that on these pull requests, the branches should be trigger should happen on the pipeline. Similarly, tags. So there are some tags you can write in your Bitbucket code. In every commit, you can create tags. So if you want to run a pipeline on addition of particular tag to your commit, then you can
Yeah.
run. Sorry, is there any question? Okay, okay. Let's go ahead. Uh, okay, so for tags, with tags also, you can run your pipelines based on the tags. And then there is a custom manual pipeline. So if you do not want to run the pipeline automatically, you can use custom or manual pipeline. Then there will be a manual intervention. You go ahead and run your pipeline manually.
Ashish, sorry to interrupt. There is one
Yeah,
question in the
yeah.
chat.
Tell me.
How is the sequence is maintained if they run in separate containers?
Okay, so it will not run these steps parallelly, right? So the sequence you write here, right? If you write one, two, three steps, so first this step will run, first this step will run, then this step will run, then this step will run, top to bottom. That is how the sequence is maintained. So when we say that there will be a trigger on branches and on development branch, and on the development branch you will be writing three steps: step one, step two, and step three. So it will run from top to bottom. It will run first this step. Once this step is complete, then it will take this step. It will run it in separate container. Then once that step is complete, then it will take the third step and it will run it in separate container. So the steps will be running one by one, but every time it will be running in separate container. So it will not be holding any data with itself. It create a thread, runs that pipeline. Once the thread completes, the notification comes here again, and then it starts running the second step. This is how the sequence is maintained. And if you write a parallel property, then it will run, and under parallel property, if you write two steps, under steps there'll be one property called parallel, and under parallel you write step one, step two. So those two steps will be running parallelly in altogether separate containers. Yeah, parallelly, not simultaneously. Here they will be running simultaneously, one by one, if you're not mentioned a parallel property in the steps.
So Ashish, in which case we can use this parallel property?
Okay, so in the cases when your first step is not related to second step, you run your parallel property. Suppose you are running two kinds of tests on your code, right? One is your unit test, and one is your security test. So you can run those two tests separately on your code, right? Uh, at one instance, what I was doing, I was first checking in one step, I was checking whether we have munit.test file or not, and in the second step, I'm writing whether the tests do the test, and based on the result decide whether we want to fail this step or we want to go to the next step. So such kind of steps we can run parallelly, where we do not have any relation between the two steps, right? Here we need the step, this step before this step, because these artifacts are being used in this step, right? But had it been a separate task, right? Two different tests, you want to run two different tests. One is say just uh, uh, one piece of test you want to run for say whatever you call it, a functional test, and you also want to run a unit test. You can run those tests separately, parallelly, right? There is no interlink in between. So then you can use those parallel steps. But yes, parallel steps you cannot use to deploy in two different environments. Just remember, two different environments means if you have a sandbox environment and if you have a production environment, you cannot use a parallel step to deploy into sandbox and production environment parallelly. It will not work. It will not run. Production will always be running after it has been deployed to sandbox environment. That is a limitation or restriction in Bitbucket pipeline. But yeah, if you want to deploy to two sandbox environments, you can do it using parallel steps. You can deploy it in two sandbox environments parallelly. Maybe a test, a performance test environment. If you have created a performance test environment and you have created a SIT environment, or you can say SIT or UAT. So you can deploy on SIT UAT parallelly, but you cannot deploy on UAT and production parallelly. So that way also you can use parallel steps.
Sure. Can you show us any sample that you have for this parallel step, or any sample big bucket pipeline file?
I will show a sample for Bitbucket pipeline, but that will not contain a parallel step.
Okay.
But writing a parallel step will be simple. I will just show you how to write a parallel step. Okay, that will not take much time. It's just a parallel property which we need to add here, and that is more than enough.
Okay. And my question was like related to size. So what does this size refer to? Uh, this size gets used, like 4 GB of data, or we are increasing
So
the size.
generally, see, by default, every step when it is running in a separate container, right? So by default, every step will take the size of 4 GB itself. So the container size is 4 GB when you're
Okay.
running, when the step is running in container, right? But if your step is too heavy and using heavy files and it requires more than 4 GB, then you increase the size of your step. But generally it doesn't I have not encountered any such situation where I need to increase that size. uh, Everything was done by the default size itself. But yeah, this is a property which is available. So if in any case any step is failing because of memory issue, you can increase that using the size property.
Okay. So in case of like increasing the size, what is the maximum size available, and from where does it gets that memory, and does it require any additional costing?
uh no, for additional sizing it doesn't require additional costing. So basically, the costing for the pipeline, right? Costing for the pipeline is always taken according to the minutes it runs.
Okay.
Okay, and you can make it up till 8x, 1x to 8x. So 8 into 4, 32 GB of memory. You can make it up till 32 GB of memory, but only when you're running it in Bitbucket Cloud. If you're running in your self-hosted pipeline runner, or like if you're running it in your Bitbucket pipeline in say Linux or Windows PowerShell or anywhere, it will use the entire memory which is present for the machine. It will not, the size thing will not work.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. And what did you say about this Docker piece?
Yeah, Docker is basically it runs a Docker service. So if any Docker property is required, generally we do not require any Docker property when we're deploying these MuleSoft steps. But
Mhm.
there was a mention, so I included here that there is a separate Docker service which runs in every step. So in any of the step, if you require any Docker property to be added, then you can add the Docker property once your Docker is enabled. Docker service is enabled. But generally, we do not require it in MuleSoft. I just mentioned it because Bitbucket provides this feature. I have not explored this feature much.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Should we go ahead? Any other question do we have?
No, please continue.
Okay. Let's go ahead. Okay. So this is a CI/CD workflow, typical CI/CD workflow, which can be realized using Bitbucket. Okay, so how it is done from the Anypoint Studio, which is your local repository, will push your code into the feature branch. So you'll create a feature branch in Bitbucket. You will push your code into the feature branch. There'll be a commit ID, unique commit ID, which will be generated. Then there'll be a pull request from the feature branch to development branch. So your code will be merged from the feature to development branch. Now, we generally write our pipelines triggering on the branches. So on the development branch, we will have a trigger, and it will automatically build the code using the Bitbucket pipeline. Once the code is built, we can do the unit testing. That can also be written in your Bitbucket pipeline itself, and then that code will be pushed into your development environment, deployed to your development environment. Okay, and from the development environment, then you create further branches, maybe release or something, or you can write uh, the step to move it to test environment. You move it to test environment, and then it gets deployed to test environment, and similarly to prod environment. So this is how your workflow will be uh, from starting from the endpoint studio to the production environment. So we'll take a look on the branching strategy as well a little later, but let's move forward. Okay, so how do we set up CI/CD using Bitbucket? So there'll be certain prerequisites. So you'll be requiring MuleSoft Anypoint Platform account with CloudHub 2.0 and Bitbucket Atlassian account for code repository, activated Bitbucket pipelines. So first time you need to activate your pipelines in every repository. So there is a bar, a toggle button where you go and activate your pipeline. So in every repository you have to activate your pipelines, and then your pipelines will be available to run. Then you need Anypoint Studio for code development and Mule Maven plugin 3.8.1. So for CloudHub 2.0, you require 3.8.x version of your Mule Maven plugin. Okay, so what we will do, we will create an Anypoint Studio project. Suppose, let's say we have created a Hello World project. We'll have a Mule Maven plugin version 3.7.1 or higher in POM file, right? So if you see here, the version will be higher. So we have used 3.8.1. Add CloudHub 2.0 configuration. So in CloudHub, we were using CloudHub deployment. Now we will be using CloudHub 2 deployment here as the configuration. And there are certain fields which we need to take care of. What those fields are: the URI for the Anypoint platform where your where your code will be getting deployed. Provider will be MC always for CloudHub, that is provided by MuleSoft itself. The environment, on which environment you want to deploy, the target, whether it is a shared space or a private space. So you need to write the name of your private space or shared space in the target. Then what Mule version you will be using, 4.4.0 or any Mule runtime version which will be using, that you can mention using Mule version. Now you can deploy your code using two ways. One is using the Anypoint platform username and password, or using uh, oh, what's that?
Connected app.
Connected app. Sorry, I forgot. Yeah, so you can you can deploy it using username, password, and the connected app. Right. So this particular configuration is for username, password. I have also shared the variables for connected app. So if you are using username, password, we'll write username and password tag here. If you are using connected tab, you can write connected app client ID, connected app client secret, connected app grant type, right, and the server. So these will be there for connected app, and otherwise we'll be using username and password. Application name, what will be your application name when it gets deployed? Then in CloudHub 2.0, you create replicas. So how many replicas you need, how many vcores you need. So it should be 0.01 vcore. If you can use one vcore or two vcores as well, but the smallest one is 0.1 vcode. So you can write 0.1 vcode here. The business group id or the business group name, but generally we prefer business group id. So you can mention the business group id here. For business group name, you have a different property called business group. You can use any one of them. It doesn't matter. And then deployment timeout. So deployment timeout is basically if your deployment is taking a lot of time, then you can time out your deployment using this property. Then there are certain deployment settings. So if anybody has worked on CloudHub 2.0, when you deploy your application, there is an ingress tab. In the ingress tab, you have certain features, like there is a public URL which will be provided. So you can also create your own public URL here. uh, and you can mention, so once you deploy the application, your public URL will be there and you can call your application using the public URL. In case of shared space, the public URL is by default generated, but if you are using a private space, then you can mention a URI of your choice for this application, although the host and everything will be taken from your ingress, right, which will be defining there. So the URI you can change from here, what the name of the app you want in the URI, that you can change here, and you can write that entire URL in this property. Then there are two there are two fields like forward SSL session and last mile security. So you can toggle those fields here if you want to have that forward SSL session or last mile security true. So you can mention them here. Then you can also have the update strategy, whether you want to recreate or you want to deploy another. So you can do that using the update strategy. Then your clustered, if you want clustering to be there, and if you want to generate a default public URL, then this property can be used. And then in the properties section, you mention what are the properties you want in your properties tab at runtime. So those properties come under properties section. And if you want any secure property, so in CloudHub 2.0, you can secure your properties as well, right? There is a secure button in each and every property. But if you are deploying using the Bitbucket pipeline, you can have your secure properties in secure properties tab. So these properties, once the application is deployed, will automatically be secured. Okay. And then you have to then you'll be using mule maven facade, which is v3. Now this is the latest version of mule maven facade, which will be using in distribution management for CloudHub 2.0. It has all the features included. Let's go ahead. Then you create certain variables in Bitbucket. So whatever we have seen, let's go ahead. So these are the variables which you've created, right? Environment, shared space name, mule version, user, username, password, app name, right? All these variables will not be passed from your property file, like can be passed from your property file, but you can also pass them directly from your Bitbucket variables. So if you create a variable in Bitbucket with this name, shared space name, so that will automatically be applied here. So if you see, there are three ways you can create Bitbucket variables at the workspace level. So in the workspace level, you go to workspace, you go to workspace settings, then we have a workspace variables at the bottom, and then you can write your workspace variables here. So the name should be same. What you are using here, the name should be same in your variable, and it will automatically take that variable. Then you can also define it at repository level. So if you go to any repository like hello world, there are in the repository settings under uh, pipelines, you have repository variables. You can write a repository variable here as well. uh, Again, Bitbucket will take the variable value from here, and you can also create environments into your repository in the deployment section, like dev, test, and prod environment, and you can have your variables under certain environments. So based on the environment, it can take the property. Now the preference is, whatever environment variable, if the variable is defined in environment, it will take the environment variable. If it is not defined in environment, it is defined in repository, it will take the repository variable. If it is not defined in environment and repository, it will take the workspace variables. So what we generally do, we create all the common variables like anypoint platform URL or any username password for anypoint platform. All those common URLs can go to the workspace variables, because we do not require to change them for every environment or every repository. All the repository related variables like the app name will always be same for all the three environments. So we can write it in repository variables, and all the environment related variables, we create the environments here in deployments, and we put those variables in the environment. Then we have create pipeline.yaml file. So as we discussed that we will be having a pipeline.yaml file, bitbuckets dash pipelines.yml file. That file will have its definitions, and then there will be steps like pipelines. So what we have done, we have created definitions, we have created steps. So in this step, we have only the message that CloudHub 2.0 pipeline step starts. The second step is create settings.xml. So what we are doing is we are creating a settings.xml, and we are using it as an artifact, uh, putting it into an artifact, and then that artifact will be used to, now in the CloudHub 2.0, the Mule Maven plugin will be used, and the Mule Maven plugin will be using like there'll be two steps. First, we'll be publishing the app to Exchange, and the second one is deploying the app to Anypoint Platform Runtime Manager. So if you have already created an asset, maybe you have written a RAML and you have published it to Exchange with the name of the app. Suppose your Hello World, you have already published to Exchange with Hello World. So make sure that in your pom.xml or anywhere, the app, this app name, right, which you're using the artifact ID, that should be different. That should not be Hello World, because otherwise there will be a conflict. So artifact ID, you have to change the name. Maybe make it hello world dash app before publishing it to Exchange here. So first your artifact will go to Exchange. It will reside there, and from Exchange, it will be moving to the deployment part, right? So there are two steps involved. First is publishing the artifact to Exchange, and the next one is deploy to dev environment. So we have defined all the steps under definitions, and then we have written the pipelines. What we have done in the branches, we have created development, release, pipelines, right? And if you see, we have for the development branch, we have message, settings, publish to Exchange, and deploy, right? So the message is this step. CloudHub 2.2 pipeline starts. The settings is this step where we create settings.xml. Then the third step will be publish to Exchange. So it will be doing, it will be publishing it to Exchange. So command will be mvn clean deploy, right? It will publish to the Exchange. And the next will be deploying to the environment. So whatever environment we want to deploy, we just write deployment and the environment name. S- Okay, so this deploy step we have used, and we have overridden this deployment property. We have defined this deploy step here. There is a deployment property where we have mentioned feature in the definitions, but when we go and use this step inside the pipelines, we have just overridden this deployment property, and we have added dev branch instead of feature here, so that it deploys to dev branch. So as soon as the code is merged with dev branch, these all steps will run automatically. Okay. uh,
Ashish,
yeah, yeah.
can you like zoom out a little because it is not visible that. texts are not visible. And the thing that you said, that name should not be overwritten, right? We should have different naming in CloudHub 2.0. So how you are doing that?
Yeah, I'll come to that. I'll just show a little demo. So we'll discuss more on there. You will be able to see it clearly there. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. And then we have also created one release. So we create different release pipelines, and with that release pipeline, you can see we have used the message step again from the definitions, and then we have used two deployments. So one is deployment to test and the other one is deployment to prod environment. Now these are not parallel steps, so we can have it in a single branch, but if we make it parallel, this step and this step, then these steps will not run. This step will fail to run because we cannot run into sandbox and production environments parallelly. So that is why these are sequential steps. Once it will deploy to test environment, then it will deploy to production environment. And you can also notice there is a trigger property which is manual. So in the dev there is no trigger which is manual, right? So everything will take place automatically. All these steps will be deployed automatically here. We do not need to do anything. It will do all these things and will deploy to dev, and uh, it will sit there. But for release, right, what will happen, it will wait in this step. In the deployment step there will be button which is published called deploy. You have to manually go and deploy this because you have a trigger manual. So in that pipeline, in that particular step, you have to manually deploy to test environment, similarly to production. So this is the use of trigger property here. Okay. Okay, then there is how to push to Bitbucket. So I've given some steps. You can go through these steps later as well. I'll go. What will happen, like whenever you are working with Anypoint Studio and Bitbucket, right? So you can create your personal SSH key, which can be used to clone your code into Anypoint Studio and push the commit changes into Anypoint Studio with that key. So there are some steps. You need to install your Git, which will come with OpenSSH. Then you can check that your OpenSSH is successfully deployed with this particular command sshv, which will give you the version. Then you have to start the SSH agent in your git bash, and then create a key pair, ssh key pair. So you have this command where ssh key gen, you give your username, which is used for the Bitbucket, and any key name which you want to have. So you can provide any name here. So with that there'll be two files which will get created. One is the .pub file, and one is there'll be another file with this key name, and there'll be one .pub file. So with the .pub file is your public key, and the file which is created with this key name, right, that will be your private key. So private key you need to add to your git bash, and public key you need to add to your Bitbucket. So there are certain steps to put it into Bitbucket. I'll just show those steps how to do that. And for adding the private key or to your git bash, you can just use this command ssh add, and whatever your file name or file path is there, you put that file path as we have done here, ssh add, and we've given meetup demo, so it automatically adds that key here. And then in the last, you can check once your public key is added to the Bitbucket, you can check your connection. It's working fine. So you will be able to use your Anypoint Studio without putting your username password again and again to commit and do the changes in Anypoint Studio. Okay. Then from the Anypoint Studio, you need to push into Bitbucket. So what you will be doing, there is a once you right click on your project, there's an option team. In team you can go to share project. If you have not created any if you do not have any Bitbucket repository and you have not cloned any repository, then for the first time you need to create the repository, then commit your changes, you need to create the branch, and then you need to do a remote push. So your code will go first time to the repository. If you already have a repository, then cloning and pushing the code will be very simple. Okay, that step I will show you because I've already that repository cloned, right? Okay, so once the code is synced with development branch, so once you're pushing your code, you'll push your code into say feature branch, and then you will create a pull request from feature to development. So once your code is synced with development branch, the pipeline will automatically get triggered. So this is how your pipeline looks inside. So there's a first step, status message, other step, create settings.xml, and then publish to exchange, and then this one, right? So these this way you can uh, see your pipeline running, and you can see there is a button, right? So once it is deployed to dev environment, this button will be enabled that you can redeploy the same code again to the dev environment. Similarly, in the release pipeline which you've seen, you can see the deploy buttons for the test and prod environments to deploy. Okay, uh, let's move ahead. Okay, so with using connected apps, what you need to do is you need to create a connected app in Anypoint Platform Access Management, then create a common repo in Bitbucket, add settings.xml. So I've done two things here. In the previous way, what we were doing is we were creating a we were creating a settings.xml on the go. So what I have done, I have taken a basic settings.xml, I have changed it to base 64. And now what I'm doing here, I'm that base 64 settings.xml, I'm just decoding it and using it here. Okay, but there is another way we can do it is by keeping by creating a common repository in the Bitbucket and keep your settings.xml in the common repository. Okay, and from that common repository you can use that in your pipeline. So if you see here, I'm just cloning that common repository here, and from that common repository with the artifact property, I'm just taking the settings.xml as an artifact which can be used in other steps as settings.xml. So I'm not creating the settings.pipeline on the go. There is a settings.xml which is residing in my common repository. I'm using that common repository here. Okay, and for using connected app, you just need to mention that server name which you are maintaining in your settings.xml to create to the connected app. I'll show both these configurations as well in the demo. And yeah, so this is how you can use the connected apps and the common settings.xml to deploy. The next is Bitbucket Slack integration. So whatever changes you are doing to your pipelines or whatever things you're doing, if you want a Slack notification to that, so you can also connect your Bitbucket repository with Slack. The steps are quite simple. You go to repository settings, there is an option Slack. In the Slack, there will be an option settings. You just add a new workspace there. So once you click to add workspace, uh, you will be having this pop-up, and in that pop-up you can just provide the Slack workspace, whatever your workspace is, you can provide that workspace, right, and add that workspace, and it's done. Nothing else you need. So whatever changes you want to have, right, you can just in your Slack notification there is an option where you can decide what notifications you need, or repository wide what notifications, master branch what notifications, feature branch what notifications. Just select those notifications and you'll start getting those notifications in your Slack channel. So it's as simple as that. And then we have branching strategy example. So let's take a look on branching strategy example little later. Let's go to demo first. Okay, so let's go to the Anypoint Studio. We have a Hello World app which is already created, and in the pom.xml if you see your artifact ID, the artifact ID which I have used, right? It's hello world dash app. I'm not using hello world. If I already have a RAML with the name hello world, which is deployed, which is published to Exchange, then you will not be able to publish the this artifact as hello world to Exchange, because it will throw you an error that this particular artifact ID already exists. So you have to have a unique artifact ID. So I've just added dash app in the artifact ID here, so that it will mention that your artifact is different, right? This artifact is different from whatever you have published to Exchange by the RAML code. The group ID will be your business group ID. Okay. And the version you can use 1.0.0. There is also a support for snapshot version, but snapshot is basically recommended for the items like connectors and all, where you have a continuous upgrades, right? So that allows the snapshot version, but it recommends that if you're not using any such application which have the continuous upgrades and all this stuff, then use the do not use the snapshot version. And every time you're deploying to Bitbucket, you have to change the version, at least the minor version of the app, if you are doing any changes. Otherwise you need to delete your artifact from Exchange, because it will say that with the same version an artifact already exists.
Ashish, one question here, like uh, with the same artifact we will not be able to publish, right? How can we make it dynamic, and also with this versioning?
Uh, okay. See, you can make it dynamic with what you can do is, as we have given these variables here, right? So you can just create those variables here as well in the artifact ID. You can write the art, but that will give you that will show an error here. In the real time scenario, it will work. Here it will show error because it says that artifact ID or version should be it actually parses this version 1.0. It should follow the same format, it says. But if you write this instead of this, if you write say dollar build number, right? Sorry, I was writing somewhere else. So, dollar, and if you write build number, right? There are certain variables which is provided by Bitbucket, right? So probably Bitbucket build number is one of the inbuilt or by default variable which is provided by Bitbucket. For every build it creates a unique ID or unique number, so that can be taken using that particular variable Bitbucket build number. So you can just make the version 1.0 dot, and then with the dollar sign you can provide that variable here. So every time your build increases, your version also increases. Okay.
Okay,
But it will show some, once you save it, it will show some errors in Anypoint Studio, because Anypoint Studio actually parses that it's not an integer, it's some string written here, right? So in Anypoint Studio you will see some errors, but in the real scenario, if you are deploying it to Bitbucket and if it is getting realized through pipelines, it will run smoothly. It will not have any issues, because I have done that, so I know it.
okay. And every time we have to update this artifact or AD also, right? So,
Yes, artifact ID. So see, this is a one-time activity, right? This is not the artifact ID is not every time activity. It's a one-time activity. The version the next time you will only changing the version, right? You do not need to change the artifact ID again and again for the same API.
mhm.
Only once you are creating an API, then you need to give the name of the API, a separate name of the API, and then you will only be changing the versions. You will not be
Okay,
touching this artifact ID anymore.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Apart from that, we have this plugin CloudHub 2.0 deployment. You can see all those variables here. Uh, I think we do not have any question on these, right? This is fine. So you can see I have given a property greet and property environment and properties, and in the secure properties I've given HTTP port just to depict that we automatically get these properties as secure properties. And then we need to have a distribution management where we need to have this facade, version 3 facade, and it will also have your business group ID here, this particular facade. Okay.
What is provider in this cloud of deployment part?
Provider is by default, they have given a value for CloudHub 2.0 deployment. So for CloudHub 2.0 deployment, you will always be using this private provider. It is default value provided by
Okay,
MuleSoft. For RTF, it's a different value. For CloudHub, it is a different value. It's like that.
okay,
For
okay.
on-prem, it's a different value. So for CloudHub, you will always be using this MC as a provider.
Got it.
Okay. Uh, and the other thing is Bitbucket pipelines. So let's see the Bitbucket pipelines. Bitbucket pipelines will reside in your root folder. In the root folder, you'll be having these definitions, right? So in the first definition, we're just writing CloudHub 2.0 pipeline step starts. The second one is create settings.xml. So what I have done is I have created a simple settings.xml. Let me go to that. Oh man. Okay, this is one and this is two. Okay. So if you see here, I have given three servers: a repository, Anypoint Exchange, and MuleSoft releases. All these three servers will have username and password. So this basic settings.xml I have created. In this basic settings.xml, since repository, Anypoint Exchange v3 and MuleSoft releases, we have already defined here, right? Anypoint Exchange v3 and MuleSoft releases, right? And then this repository. So we have already defined these three servers in the settings.xml, and that basic settings.xml with the username password, right? I've created this basic settings.xml. What I've done, I've taken this code and I have just created a base 64 out of it. That's it. So I have encoded it into base 64. This encoded settings.xml I have written here. Okay. If you see, this is the entire settings.xml. I'm just decoding it to base 64 and putting it into settings.xml as a file name. And I'm mentioning the artifact. So what it will do, this particular thing will create a settings.xml file. This particular script will decode this base 64 and create a settings.xml file inside your cloned the step for this step your repository is cloned, right? In that cloned container, the settings.xml will be created. And when you mention that artifact settings.xml, so that settings.xml will be saved to be used for further steps. So in the next step, what I'm doing is mvn clean deploy, and I'm just mentioning that settings.xml from the artifact to publish it to exchange, and then we are deploying using dmule deploy. So when we use dmule deploy, it will deploy to runtime manager. When we do not use anything, just mvn clean deploy, it will just publish to exchange. Okay, we are using the same settings.xml here. So this is how we have defined our steps, and then we have created the actual. So this is what which runs. So for the development branch, if the code is going to development branch, then this part will be triggered. If the code is going to release branch, then this part will be triggered. And whatever manual steps are there, that will it will stop at the manual step and will wait for you to push the button to deploy to test environment or deploy to prod environment. this all will be done automatically. So this is how we write our Bitbucket pipelines.yaml file. Okay. uh, Next thing is, so we have already covered this creating of form. Okay. Next thing is your Bitbucket variables. So let's go to the Bitbucket variables. So in the settings, you have this workspace settings. In the workspace settings, you have workspace variables. And here you can define your workspace variables like URI, shared space, mule version, username, password. These I have defined in the vCores, replicas, and all of that I have defined in the at the workspace level. Okay. And you can also secure them. So if you are creating a variable with the secure tag, then these variables will not be visible to you at all, and nobody can see these variables. These will be encrypted. And if you are removing the secure tag, then these variables will be visible to you and you can see them clearly. Okay. Then the second place is your repository. So if you go to your hello world repository, in the repository settings, just remember for this you must have access, admin access to the repository. To go to the repository settings, if you do not have admin access, you will not see this repository settings at all in your API, in your repository. This part will be missing. So if you have admin access, then only you can go to the repository settings. Go to the repository settings, then there is an option called pipelines. uh, this one, right? And in the pipelines there is an option called settings. So settings, you have to enable the pipelines first. By default these pipelines will be disabled. So if the pipelines are disabled, no matter how many configuration files you put in your code, it doesn't work at all. So you need to enable your pipelines to take that pipeline, to run that pipeline.xml, bitbucket pipelines.xml. Okay. Then there is an option called repository variables. You can create your repository variables here. So this will take precedence over workspace variables. So I've defined app name here. And then there is an option called deployments. In the deployments, you can create your environments. So I've created a dev environment and test environment. Under test environments, there is a staging. I have not created. By default you get this test, staging, and production. Okay. So if you do not want to make use of staging, just you can simply delete it. Okay. Or you just don't use it, let it sit idle here, no problem. Okay. I have created a dev environment specifically, so you can create environments from here. Where it was, yeah, you can just add the environment, give the name of the environment, that's it, just environment name. So it will create this kind of environment for you, right? And then you can write your variables, the environment specific variables here. So I've given a public URL of my API. I've provided HTTP port, greet, env environment here, right? So this will take precedence over repository and workspace variables. Similarly, you can define test variables, you can define production variables, and all those stuff. Okay. So these are the variables which are covered. Then pipelines.xml, I guess we have already covered this pipeline.xml, how we will be creating the pipeline.xml. The next thing is push to Bitbucket. So this you have to run in your Git bash. So I have already done this. What I will tell you is how to add the public key to Bitbucket. Once you do a SSH keygen, you will have two kinds of files. One is your .pub file and one is your key name file. Key name file will be your private key. That private key will be added to your git bash using that SSH add command, and your public key with .pub will be added to the Bitbucket. How can you do that? Just go to the settings, personal settings. In the personal settings, you have SSH keys, right? And then you can add your SSH key here. You can write a name and all the contents of your public key you can add that those contents of your public key here. So your SSH key will be added, and then you can simply check your connection. One more thing, Bitbucket have changed a little bit. So you have to enable your two-step verification in order to run your pipelines. Your pipelines, once you're going to enable your pipelines, it will always mention that without two-step verification, it will not allow you to enable the pipelines. So you have to go to your personal settings and go to two-step verification, enable your two-step verification. Once the two-step verification is enabled, then only you will be able to enable your pipelines. Okay, uh, let's go to the repository quickly. What else we have? Then go to your code. There is an option. You do a right click. Then you have a team. There is share project option. You will be getting a share project option if you do not have any if you have not already merged your code at all, right? This is the first time you're creating a repository. You'll have a share project option, so you have to click on that share project, and then you will be able to get these options. All these options will be visible, so then you can do a commit, and then you can just go to team, go to commit, and you can do the commit. Then you can also do the next step, which is create branch and do a remote push. So you will also be having an option to create a branch. Okay, so the branch is already created probably. You can go to switch to, and you can create a new branch from switch to. If the branch is already created, you do not need to do anything because the branch is already there, and you just need to do a remote push. Once you do a remote push, it will ask some credentials. So those credentials can be provided once you've already done your this thing, generated your key, right? So it will automatically take your key once you clone your Bitbucket. So the other thing is, if you want to clone, go to Git perspective. There is an option called clone a Git repository, right? So you just go to your repository, click on clone, select HTTPS, copy it, then go to your clone your repository. You've already copied, so everything will be auto populated here. The username and password will be auto populated once you do this, these settings, these settings. So you do not need to put your username password again and again. It will automatically be populated. You just need to clone there, and once you click on clone, you see hello world git is already there, right? Let us check with hello world 2 also. So go to repository, we have a hello world 2, and if I do a clone, copy, clone a repository, so you see hello world 2, now hello world 2 is already populated. So this will be populated once you do next, and finish, your repository will be cloned here. If in any case your repository is not there in uh, design perspective, and it's already present here, then you can just do a right click and import projects. So it will import the code into the design perspective, and you can work from there. For merging, sorry, for pushing the things, whatever changes you will do in the pipelines, right? So any file in the code, if you're doing any changes, suppose I'll go to the pom file, and I'll just remove a space and save it. So you'll be able to see those changes here in Git staging tab. These are unstaged changes. You just need to stage those changes and write any commit message, changes and form, and just do a commit and push. So this code will be automatically committed to your repository. So if you see in the commits part, okay, I've done it in hello world. So let's go to hello world and go to commits part. So see 19 seconds ago, changes in POM. The code is already committed. Now this is committed to my feature branch, feature test, right? Now I need to do a pull request to dev branch, but before that, uh, there is one more thing which will be required, and that is I need to change the version. Otherwise, Exchange will have a problem, right? Okay, where I was. Hmm. Let us go to Exchange. So in the Exchange, you have to write question mark type is equal to app. So you'll get all the jar files which you have, or the artifacts which you have already uploaded here. So you can see hello world artifact, right? In the hello world, you already have a version 1.0.x, right? So it will not allow me to put the same version 1.0.0. So if I'll do a pull request and the pipeline runs, and the pipeline will fail with the error that the version already exists. So either I change the version here, or I delete this versions altogether. So let me delete this asset. I have deleted this asset now. And then what I can do is I'll just go to the pull request, create a pull request from the feature to the development branch. The changes are there. I had tested this change, but not merged into dev. So that is why two commits are coming in. So let's create a pull request. So pull request is created. Once we approve and merge the code to development branch, there will be a pipeline which will get triggered automatically. You can see this pipeline in progress, right? And here all the steps will start running. You can see the teardown and the logs. If you're doing any echo, everything will be presented here. What is being done in the app, in the step. Similarly, your cloning. Now, if you see in this cloning, right, I've created an artifact settings.xml. So there is a tab which is created called artifacts automatically. And in this artifact, we have settings.xml. We can even download and see the value of the settings.xml. It is a tar.gz, and inside there will be a settings.xml file. You can see the values also. This artifact will be available for 14 days. So artifacts will automatically expire after 14 days. So if there is any case you want to preserve an artifact which should be preserved for more than 14 days, then you have to use a third party repository, because Bitbucket doesn't provide any uh, option to do that. So maybe you can use a JFrog or something to store those artifacts if those artifacts require for a longer period of time. And then the next step is publish to Exchange. So it will download all the dependencies and it will publish to Exchange, and then it will deploy to dev environment. When we see the release till the time it is deploying, let's take a look on the Bitbucket pipeline. So when we see the release pipelines, right, we will not have this thing. Yeah, we do not have, we should not have the step for publishing to Exchange, because we've already published to Exchange. Simply deployment will be done. It will take automatically, it will take that file from Exchange and it will deploy to the higher environments. So no need to have a step of publishing to Exchange. And similarly, we have this thing where we were using connected app. So if you see, I have given all the properties of the connected app. This variable is provided inside the workspace variables, the value of this variable, right? So nothing major change here. Only the changes will be in the pipelines. So let us take a look what I have done till the time it's getting published and deployed. I will take, I guess, 15 minutes more. Uh, okay, I have created a common repo. In the common repo, I have placed the settings.xml file. Okay, and the username and password will be the connected app username and password. So this is the way we provide the connected app credentials. Username will be by hard-coded client. Okay, you do not need to change anything in this way. You need to provide the username, and in the password you write the connected app ID with these three symbols and then connected app secret. This is how you provide the password. So this is how you connect with connected app. uh, okay, using the connected app, this is how you realize your authentication to any one platform. And for all these servers, I have given the same. Okay, and all these variables will be taken from the workspace variables which we have defined already. So I've created this common repo, and in this common repo, from this common repo, I'm just cloning this common repo inside my pipeline. So if you see the pipelines here, what I have done is, in this step, I'm just cloning the settings.xml and I'm putting it in artifacts. So in previous way, I was just using the base 64 value and creating a settings.xml file on the go. But now I'm using the already present settings.xml by cloning this Bitbucket uh, repo here and then using the settings.xml everywhere. Okay, so this is another way of doing it. Uh, let's check. Okay, we have to go to hello world and then pipelines. Okay, it got failed and it got failed to. Okay, so it's saying this is a deleted asset with the same number and try creating your new asset with a higher version. Okay, so we have to create a new asset with a higher version. So because it's been a time, this asset is already deploying and working, right? So you cannot delete and move forward. So let us create a higher version of it and push those changes again. Okay, the changes are not pushed yet. Okay, I was using hello world too, sorry. That should be this one. Let's save it. So now that change is available, let's create a pull request, approve, and merge. One more thing, if there is any step which has failed, and if you want to rerun the failed step again, you can do this. You just need to do from the drop down and just rerun that failed step. So anytime if there is any variable issue, the Bitbucket variable issue, and you just need to change the value of Bitbucket variable, you do not need to commit your code and push back again. You just need to change the variable and rerun the failed step. You do not need to run these steps. So whatever minutes being taken here, right, your usage will be here, and according to the minutes you will be charged by the Bitbucket. So you get first 50 minutes free every month in your free account. Okay. Since it is deploying, let us quickly take a look on the branching strategy and development lifecycle. So this is a basic branching strategy example where what we do is we create feature branch whenever we want to create a new feature or we want to do the changes in the code, right? So those feature branch will be developer specific. So I am a developer. If I want to want to work on a piece of code and want to do some changes, I'll create my own feature branch. We'll do the changes and push the changes into feature branch daily. So once I think that this is the time I need to push my changes to development, then I will create a pull request to the development branch. Whatever the dev lead is, he will go and do the code review or whatever he wants to do to approve. He will approve or reject that pull request. If the pull request is approved and merged, then it goes to the development branch. So our development pipeline will automatically run and will deploy everything to development branch. Then if I want to do a release, we can create a release branch separately. So if I want to release a certain feature, I create a release branch for that particular feature, and in that release branch we can have an option to deploy to test and prod environment, like we have already seen in our Bitbucket pipeline, right? So we manually deploy to test environment, and then we wait till all the testings are done and we get a sign off to deploy to production. So once we get a sign off, we again go to that same pipeline and we'll click a button to deploy to production. It will get deployed to production. Once the code is deployed to production and there is no rollback, then we can merge that code to the master branch. This is one kind of a branching strategy. So master will always have a copy of a production, right? So master will be synced only after the code is merged to the to the production branch. The other strategy says that you release and move it to master. Once the code is merged to master, then you go to the production. But what if you have a rollback? If you have a rollback, then you have to do a rollback there, and you also need to uh, recommit remerge your code with the previous changes to the master branch, so that master will have a copy of production. So there'll be two things which you will be doing in that strategy, and there are a lot of various other strategies as well. You can go ahead and explore that, but this is the way we create these branching strategies, and we create pipelines around these branching strategies. The other thing is development lifecycle. So development lifecycle is nothing but the entire SDLC lifecycle in span of a feature or a use case. We'll just simply go through it. That any product owner will create a Jira story. The status of the Jira story will be in to-do state. It will go to the developer. Developer will create a feature branch and mark it in progress. Will do the changes, develop the code, unit test the code, and uh, push the request and create a pull request to dev. Once a pull request is created, a reviewer or a dev lead will review that pull request, approve that pull request, and the Bitbucket pipeline will automatically deploy that to dev environment. Then there'll be a dev testing which will be executed. There'll be a request for the deployment to test environment, right? So dev lead, what it will do, it will create a release branch if it is not already created. But if there is a release branch or developer is working on a bug fix, then he will approve the pull request to the release branch, and then you will have a manual button to deploy to test. So dev lead will request for a tester an approval that are we ready to move these new changes to test environment. Once the tester will give an approval, we'll just trigger the CI/CD pipeline with the deploy button enabled. So we'll click the deploy button to deploy to test environment. Once it is deployed to test environment, tester will be ready to test the code. Either he will give a sign off or he will raise a defect. If the defect is raised, then the entire process is to be repeated again. Okay. If the defect is not raised and if we have given a sign off, it goes to product owner is responsible to conduct a UAT testing and provide a UAT sign off. The life cycle of UAT will also be more or less the same, which we have from developer to tester, right? And then once we get a UAT sign off, the change control board will give an approval for production. Once that approval for production is done, then the release manager, he will go ahead and will deploy it to production using the deploy button in our pipeline, and the code will be deployed to production using the CI Bitbucket pipeline. Once the code is deployed to production, we'll have we'll merge this, we'll see whether we'll do the post deployment activities, and if there is no rollback, we'll just merge this code with the master branch and the status of the Jira ticket will be done. This is the entire life cycle of a use case, how a use case is realized using all the factors and the Bitbucket pipelines in place. So this is one of the example. Again, we can do our own mix and match, and whatever suits our organization better, we can go with that and do the changes in the strategy. Uh, Meanwhile, let's take a look on the deployment. Okay, deployment to dev environment is waiting. Why it is waiting? Because you've reached your month. Oh my God. Sorry guys, I've reached my monthly quota for running this. I guess my minutes are, I've used 51.8 minutes. That is why the deployment to uh, dev environment is not done. Otherwise, our publish to exchange was successful, right? So probably what I can show you is a runtime manager. And in the runtime manager, let's go to the hello world. So see, this is the public endpoint. It is generated by default when you are using shared space. This is the target name of your shared space. Here you can get the target name. But if you're using a private space in your ingress tab, you also get an option to add an endpoint and add a URI, app name also, the subdomain, right? So that subdomain you can add it through your pom.xml using that public URL thing. Okay, and these are the last mile security forward SSL session which you can which you can write like mark it true or false, and then these are the properties. So if you see the properties which are under properties, you can see those properties which are populated, and the properties which are under secure properties, they're already protected, so you do not need to come here and protect them by explicitly. That is being taken care by the pom.xml itself. And these are your replica count, replica size, and everything will be coming as per your pom file. So this is how your app is deployed to the Anypoint platform using the Bitbucket pipelines. I guess this is the end of the presentation. The rest I have added some references where I've taken some references, so I've added them, and that's the part. So guys, any questions, anything you want to ask, any doubts? I know that I've exceeded the time limit, but try to cover everything for you. uh, Sorry for exceeding the time limit.
Uh, don't say sorry, Ashish. First of all, thanks for lot many efforts you took in presenting the session here in Bangalore Meetup. It was a great presentation, very informative, and I feel everyone will be having the same thought. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks a lot. And do you have, guys? If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to help. Yeah.